What up? This is your boy Checo.
This is your boy Noe. What up?
And this is Compas Unfiltered. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. Make sure you guys follow all of our social media, subscribe and like.
And make sure you go rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you drop a comment on YouTube. Like and subscribe.
Yes, sir. Enjoy the episode. Episode 126. Salud, compa.
Saludcita.
Welcome back to another episode of Compas Unfiltered. And I want to, before I introduce my guest, this episode has been on my bucket list if you guys been listening to us for a while. So I'm happy to have you on. Reese, thank you for coming on Compas Unfiltered.
Of course.
Welcome.
Thank you.
This is, so first question right off the bat, and we're going to start going into it, but that's why I wanted to stop and go in here. Mm-hmm. You're a therapist.
Yep.
But when we talked about what's the difference between a therapist and a psychiatrist? Mm-hmm. So besides I'm guessing the pay.
Oh, for sure. Very big difference.
What else is the difference between that?
Yeah, so when thinking about like mental health professionals, there's actually a few different differentials with like licensure and everything. So a psychiatrist has like a medical doctor degree, and they can prescribe medicine and all of that. And then a therapist, we don't prescribe medicine or anything like that. I know in other states, I'm not sure where, but I have heard that therapists are allowed to prescribe medicine in other states. Obviously, Illinois, we don't. That would have been cool, but yeah, we don't. So psychiatrists typically they do talk to their clients, but therapists definitely go way more in depth, especially if you're thinking like at a hospital, right? Therapists overall, we talk the majority of the time with them, and then psychiatrists usually, after you have the initial session with them, which could be like 30 minutes or whatever, after that, they probably just check in with you for like 10 minutes.
So that's always going to be my question. So it's almost like, yeah, kind of like a doctor, and then like the nurse takes care of you, right? Like that's kind of how it goes when you go to the hospital. Like the doctor, at least when I've gone to the hospital, it's like, yeah, you see the doctor, but the nurse is there kind of like around the clock. You know?
Yeah, in the hospital for sure.
So for you, it would kind of be the same thing. Like you're there more often. You're talking to the patient more than actual.
Like typically I'll see them once a week or whatever, and then a psychiatrist, they'll see them like once a month for a certain amount of time, but then usually it goes to like every 90 days. And It's usually just a check-in. How are you doing? How are the meds? You feel like they're working? Yes, no, let's adapt. So it's usually just a check-in after that first initial session.
Do you report to a psychiatrist?
No.
Okay.
Unless like if I have a client that does see a psychiatrist, a lot of the times I want to get a release of information so I can talk to their psychiatrist, but it's like no relation or anything. We're just talking about a client, making sure we're on the same page.
When you say talking about a client, you and the psychiatrist, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, us talking about our mutual client.
Which doesn't happen often?
No, not really. Surprisingly,
that's kind of weird because you think you think that would have a lot to do with getting the client better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's communicating between you and the psychiatrist. I mean, I don't. That just sounds weird the way because you're like, no, not really. I'm like, oh,
yeah. Surprisingly, so far, in my private practice experience, not a lot of my clients actually take medication. A lot of people that go to therapy are trying to avoid taking medication. They want to work through the issues or whatever they're going through that's like causing the anxiety or whatever it is before they go to meds. A lot of people see medication as like the very, very last resort.
I am going to follow up on I have a question for medication, but I do want to ask, is there like by law, can you not, will they have that where you can't share information?
Oh, for sure. HIPAA. So, yeah.
So that's for therapists as well, and as psychiatrists as well.
Yeah. So I can't talk to anyone outside of my client unless they like give me their signature on our release of information, tell me I can. So even for minors, like if they're over 12, we usually want to get their consent too in order to even talk to their parents. If they're under 12 though, like we obviously can talk to their parents without a release of information. It's always about making sure our client feels comfortable though. I never want to go across their boundaries or share something they didn't want me to share. So if they do sign a release and want me to talk to their parents or whatever, I always double check what I'm going to talk to their parent or other doctor about before I go on and make that conversation.
What about police? Like if they need to talk to you for something, what do they need? Do they need like what would they be? Like not a warrant, but what God damn it. You know what I'm talking about? Like a subpoena? Would they need that in order to talk to you about a client?
So
a patient?
I think it depends. When I worked in the hospital, we did have some patients here and there that actually had warrants out, or we weren't sure if they had a warrant, so we had to contact police and everything. But in private practice, I mean, I think the only reason police would try and talk to me if it was like a safety issue.
Like if they were going to hurt someone or they're going to hurt themselves?
Right.
Yeah. And I think it would be me contacting them versus police trying to contact me. Like if I felt, like you said, if I felt my client was going to hurt themselves or someone else, I would have to make that call.
And at that point, you are able to talk about your client's issues or no?
So, I mean, I've never had to do it. But I think if I had to, I would give them as little information as possible and just let them know, like, hey, here's a situation. And then, like, other presenting things that play a role in that. Like, I'm not going to tell them their whole
anything
life
pertaining to that situation only.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And by law, you're covered by doing that? Like, they can't come at you or come after you?
They can try, yeah. They definitely can.
They can still sue you or whatever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But that's why we always, like, I don't own the private practice. My boss does, and she, like, has no problem contacting her lawyer and just making sure everything's okay, because that's the last thing I ever want to do is put someone in a position where they feel like I wronged them and they want to sue me. But they definitely can, whether they think, whether I was in the right or not, or whether I was trying to keep them alive or not. People are very particular with their privacy.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you would definitely talk to your boss, and your boss would give you the okay, like, go ahead. And, Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
She is. So even though I have like the highest licensure, I definitely still pass things along with my boss too, just because she has way more experience than me. And she's awesome. She's like one of my favorite bosses ever. So I completely feel comfortable shooting her an email or calling her about anything that I'm second guessing.
And going back to the medication, do you kind of recommend try to solve it yourself before taking meds? Like, how do you, like, personal, how do you feel about it?
I think it depends on the case. I always want my clients to definitely see if we can figure it out before they jump to medication, but I think it definitely depends on the acuity level as well. Like if they're so worked up that we can't work on coping skills or we can't work through trauma or anything like that, then I think sometimes I do recommend medication to bring them down to baseline so that we can work through that stuff. But medication can sometimes be temporary. So for example, like if I have a client with really strong like OCD tendencies because of a lot of anxiety at that moment, sometimes they can take medication for a while, and then as soon as they're able to like get through the coping skills, process what's really going on, then they can wean themselves off of medication because they have better skills to handle it moving forward.
Gotcha. Because I mean, I have anxiety. I've never been diagnosed, I guess. I've never actually gone to a therapist or a doctor or anything like that. But I just feel it, right?
Oh, for sure.
And just by talking to other people, it's like, oh, I feel like this and like that. And I've been diagnosed with anxiety. It's like, shit, so do I. Like, I feel exactly the same way. But and I've talked to my doctor about it. This is a general family practice doctor.
Yeah.
Where he was like, oh, well, maybe we should try this, some kind of medication. I don't know what he was going to try to prescribe me, but I try to avoid all medication. Like, I feel like you can just kind of do it on your own. Like you said, maybe some people can't, and they need that help. But what I've noticed, it's weird. Maybe it's just me. I don't know if you might say different, but it almost feels like your diet has a part to do with it, like a huge part. Like I feel like when I'm like eating like shit and I'm just drinking, I'm whatever, that's when my anxiety kicks in, like higher, like way higher.
Yeah.
And when I try to eat cleaner, try to like stick to water or whatever, I feel fucking great. Like, it's weird. That's why I'm like, man, do I have anxiety, or is it just like my eating habits? Because anxiety, it's like a chemical imbalance, right? And I don't, maybe trauma as well.
Oh, for sure. I think a lot of, which I could go on a huge tangent, but I think trauma is probably the source of maybe 70% of mental illness. But and also family physicians. I also have some of my clients that prefer that working with their family physicians over psychiatrists, just because they already have that. Like, some of them have been with their physician, since they were little. So it's all about comfort level. But I usually suggest that they go to a psychiatrist just because they're specialized in mental health,
right?
Versus a private practice physician, kind of broader field.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What made you get into this field?
So when I was in elementary school, maybe middle school, I think that's when Criminal Minds blew up, the show. And I always thought it was really cool how they like profile the serial killers and everything. And I was like, hey, that might be cool, trying to figure out how people's mind works. So I initially thought I would, go to school and grow up to be a psychiatrist. But after getting to, I think, undergrad, I realized that I don't want to focus on medicine and treating people that way. I really want to be able to talk to them and kind of dig deeper and help them process through that. So I definitely changed my route and wanted to be a therapist instead. But I think I was always like focused on the mental health field as a whole.
Do you suffer from any kind of mental health?
I think I've struggled with anxiety probably since elementary school. Sometimes real bad to where like I didn't want to leave the house. It got pretty bad in high school, but I remember it started in elementary school. But it's in an okay place now. It kind of depends, like what you were saying, whatever's going on, or can definitely enhance it or not make it as worse. But the 3 things I tell everyone for mental health is how you eat, how you sleep, and how you exercise. Before you go to therapy or you get medication or anything, you should see what's going on with those 3 and see if you, because I think, everyone talks about how exercise makes everyone feel better, right? And a lot of the times I have seen people's anxiety or depression get better just by changing that up.
Yeah.
Because, I know me personally, I feel way better when I'm active. I'm in a much better headspace.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And like the last, I want to say like the last month or so, like my anxiety was kind of high.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel, like I said, I haven't been diagnosed. I haven't talked to anyone about it, but I feel like I have like social anxiety and also like meeting new people. And for the last month or so, like it's definitely kicked, it's kicked on, it kicks in a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
But for the last week or so, I've been kind of eating cleaner, trying not to drink and stick to water. And that's where I'm like, man, I feel a lot better, like a lot better. I'm like, man, I should just keep doing this, because at least for me, it helps. And I'm just trying to stay away from medicine and whatnot. But I also, going back to medicine, I also want to bring up, like, what do you feel about like marijuana, psychedelics? Like, do you think that helps? Do you think that makes it worse?
I actually thought that the psychedelic stuff was pretty cool when I was in graduate school. I know a lot of it is still being studied and researched and everything. I actually had a professor when I was getting my degree that actually had a private practice, I believe in the city, but they would have their clients take ketamine before they came. And then they would do, once they come in, they're already, high on it or whatever you want to say.
Ready for the session.
And ready for a session. They would see how that goes. So I think marijuana and psychedelics could definitely help. But I also, want to base it off research. So I know marijuana has helped a lot of people, mental health, physical health, everything. Yeah. So I'm completely fine with that. Like if my clients or even my family, want to dabble in that psychedelic. So I might wait to see more research on that, broaden my horizons.
Yeah, because I'll be honest on the spot. I tried mushrooms the other day. We had the homie David, and he gifted us some mushrooms. He swears by it. I think I microdosed. I don't know if I even did it correctly, but I definitely felt good. Like the 2 times that I tried it, like I was able to go to sleep. I felt awesome, and then I'm like, well, maybe if I take some more, maybe it'll help. Then I felt horrible. Like when I took more than I was doing. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm like, maybe this isn't for me. Like I shouldn't, like I felt funny. I almost felt like, when you're drunk and like the room is spinning, that's how I felt. And I was like, this is horrible. Like this is the part that you don't look forward to when you're drunk and you're blacking out,
Right.
Yeah. I've actually had clients before that have microdosed and say it was working really well for them to the point where like they didn't think they needed their medication anymore. But it was a short-term thing, so I'll have to wait and see how that goes.
Yeah.
We're talking about shrooms, right? With the microdosing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shrooms.
I mean, but a lot of, whether I was working in the hospital or private practice, a lot of people smoke marijuana.
Yeah.
I think it helps for some.
Yeah, for some, I definitely think that it could help, but I know some people it does make it worse. Or once they smoke it for so long, it actually flips the effects and like it make them feel good for a while, and then all of a sudden it does a 180 and their anxiety just gets really bad from it.
Yeah, I definitely don't want that because I think only one time I had like a panic attack. Like from my anxiety, and that's like the worst. Like you feel like you're dying, you're having a heart attack, like you don't know what's going on. I end up in the hospital and they're like, you're fine, dude. Like nothing is wrong with you. And I'm like, what? I'm like, my heart's racing, my heart's pounding. Like nothing's wrong, man. Like you're fine. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, this is crazy.
Because sometimes you actually feel like I'm dying.
Yeah.
It gets real bad. Yeah. And then they're like, it's just in your head. And it's like, what?
And that's crazy to think that your head can do that to you.
Right.
To make you feel like you're having a heart attack or you're dying or whatever you're going through, I just thought it was crazy. What do you think about, back to like psychedelics? I don't even know this is a psychedelic, but ayahuasca?
I've never heard of it.
You never heard of it?
No. What is it?
Is that is it ayahuasca or what's it called?
Yeah, isn't the plant?
The plant. I guess it kind of puts you in that state. It's like, I guess like a psychedelic where it lasts like
couple hours.
A few hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but supposedly it helps a lot of people. Almost gets rid of anxiety or depression or whatever they're battling. But then I also do hear people that they do it a few times. So maybe it's not a one-time thing. Maybe you got to do it every so often.
So the guy that came here that gave us the shrooms, he was the one that's tried it, and obviously in a controlled room. So he goes and he's dealing through traumas through that. And he, like he said, he swears by it. He says it's a good thing. It helps him, and he seems to be in a good space, right?
Yeah.
I'll have to look more into that stuff.
Ayahuasca.
Yeah,
that's what it's called.
I'll have to look more into it because I don't think I've even looked at psychedelic research or any of that in a while. And, I'm a big advocate for education. Like, I love learning new things. If I could be a permanent student, I would. The only problem I have issues with is the testing and the homework. If I didn't have that, I would stay in school forever.
I thought you were going to say the loans.
That's another thing, dude. Yeah.
That too.
Well, he was on here talking about it. I'm not sure how much we talked about it on the episode, but we'll send you the link. Maybe on the way home, you'll listen to that one and
for
see
sure.
how he expresses himself about mushrooms and ayahuasca.
Since you got the 2-hour drive, which, sorry, by the way, I did not know you were that far out.
It's okay.
You're our second guest out of state.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Yeah, but anytime we can advocate for mental health is worth the drive.
Is worth the drive.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Since you were talking about how you kind of got into it because of like true crime and whatnot, and you are curious how the mind works, right? For I guess for that, did you learn anything as far as that? Like, is there anything you could tell us that like what would make someone do that? I don't know if that's something they
like all the way to like serial killers, like people that do all that. I am not sure, to be honest. Some people that were in the hospital, they did some dangerous things, but I think a lot of people that get into tough positions is because of trauma, the nature and nurture argument all the time, how people are raised and the environment that they are in as they grow up, I think plays a huge role. To the point of killing someone, I have no idea. I'll have to look into that more. I remember actually in undergrad, when I was taking one of my psychology gen eds, we were talking about like if we could pinpoint what gene or what aspect biologically that makes someone a serial killer, what would we do with that? Like, I think it kind of is like the one, I think Tom Cruise movie where they like can predict people doing crimes and stuff, so they arrest them before it happens. So it was a great debate. If we knew what it took to be a serial killer, would you stop them before they could even do that? And that's an incredible debate. I don't know. I don't know if there will ever be answers to that.
What is the most common thing that you do deal with? Like
in private practice or hospital?
I would say private practice, because this is going to be the more common, to at least to our listeners,
Yeah. So I think, so like I mentioned before, I think 70% of mental illness or mental health, whichever one you want to use, is from trauma. Whether it's childhood trauma, relationship trauma, whatever it is, I think it all resorts back usually to trauma. So I would say the majority of me working with clients is about trauma that we're working through. But I would say typically I work with people with anxiety, borderline personality disorder, depression, bipolar. That's usually the typical. But almost every client I have, we're working through trauma.
And like whenever you are talking to someone and do you know when they're like BSing and like they're not opening up fully, or they really don't want the help? Or is it always, you're always just battling through that and saying, hey, I'm going to get to the core of this person? Like, do you see it as a challenge? How do you take that?
I mean, I don't know if I could tell 100% when someone's like BSing or lying or anything. I think what I take out of it is like, if they are BSing or lying, what is that reason? So like something I learned in grad school is that if someone told you they like cut up their arm, they were self-harming real bad, do you actually need to lift their sleeve and see it? Or can you just like work on why they did that? If that makes sense.
So do you lift their sleeve? Because I kind of want to see it.
No.
Okay.
I don't think I need to like physically see it in order to work through what's actually going on.
You just take their word for it and then move on and use that information moving forward if it works for you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. If they're going to present a certain way, I'm going to see why that is and use that. Yeah, I try to guide the client to where they want to go instead of telling them where to go. So even if they're BSing or whatever, like what are they going to get out of it if I'm poking it apart or trying to dig deeper than they're ready for,
Yeah.
I want everyone to go at their own pace.
What are 3 things that you think would make a bad therapist?
A bad therapist?
Yeah. Like that you are like, maybe you're mingling at a social event with other therapists in downtown Chicago and you're like, oh, this person has these 3 things that are probably not helping people.
Number 1, I think, is boundaries, which I think is always hard for therapists, is to make sure that we have appropriate boundaries. I actually had a client telling me about a TikTok she watched, which was someone sharing like them texting with their psychiatrist. They're not their psychiatrist, their therapist. And I was like, I personally would never text with a client. I think if you don't have appropriate boundaries, there's a lot of lines that can be crossed, either from you or from the client. And boundaries make up the whole therapeutic relationship. If you don't have boundaries, what are you? Like
just another friend,
right? And I don't want to be your friend. Like, we are friendly, we have a therapeutic relationship, but I don't want it to cross the line where it makes one of us uncomfortable, you know? So I would say boundaries is a huge thing that we're always having to assess. I mean, it could be different with each client based on safety and all of that other stuff. But if you have bad boundaries, I wouldn't say you're a bad therapist, but it could lead to something. It could lead to some bad things happening. Two.
This is a tough question.
I think some therapists, what we all try to be is open-minded. So I think if you're pretty close-minded and set in your ways,
that's a bad quality.
You should probably work on it because. And I think, we talk about theoretical approaches, right? And I always said I was person-centered because I want to adapt as my client needs. Instead of having one strict, like, DBT or CBT view, and you just follow through with that because not everyone's going to fit one mold, right? So I adapt, ideally, with whatever my client needs. 3. What would be the third? That's a tough question. What makes a bad therapist? Maybe their own accountability, I guess. Making sure they're on track and doing what needs to be done behind the scenes and everything. Because I know for me, like, if I don't take my notes or everything, like, I'm gonna lose track of what this client is supposed to be working on. You need to be on top of, like, their goals and how they're reaching them and everything in order to help them 100%. So I would say those 3, I guess. I could probably come up with more if I had more time. But
no. I just wanted to see, like, what were 3 that came to top of top of the head right away.
Yeah.
And the reason why I asked is because I'm sure people are getting treated. Mm-hmm. Hey, if you have your therapist and that this is some of the things that you see in your therapist, maybe it's time to change. Never know. Exactly.
And I definitely think that as a therapist, we need to know our own limits. Like, I know, for example, if someone I've had this a couple times before where they want religious counseling. Like, they want someone who's like a Christian counselor. And that's not me. That is definitely not me. I'm not going to quote Bible verses or anything in therapy. I was just, not raised strongly in church or anything like that. So I'm very comfortable with telling people, like, hey, I'm probably not the best option for you. Here are some referrals to people who might be better fitting to you. And I think that could also be a quality too for a therapist. Like, when do you say no? Because I'm not going to be the best client for everybody or best therapist for everybody. That's just not going to happen. I wish I could, but like I said, one mold doesn't fit all.
Of course.
And people are going to bond with other people. So I've had, I think every therapist has had clients that will come in once and then you won't hear from them again. If you don't connect with me or if I'm not your cup of tea, that's fine. I can help you find a different therapist. I can even talk you through, like, hey, what are the things that I did wrong or that some things that bothered you? Can I work on it or where can we go from here? But I have no problem giving them referrals to other therapists and trying to help them find someone who better fits them. I think that definitely is a quality that needs to be had.
So we're not going to hear you, tell a client, like, just leave it up to God. No.
No. I think that's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I wouldn't say that. I think that, we're all in God's hands, but it's not my job to tell you, hey, here's a Bible verse, stick to it. Yeah. But some people like that. And right. I have no problem with people leaning into their faith. Like, I have people that have a lot of anxiety around death, right? And sometimes we do talk about faith, because if you believe that there's a heaven or there's reincarnation or anything, then maybe you have something to look forward to, versus if you don't believe there's anything, you might fear death because that's it, right? So I have no problem talking about faith if they want to, or if they lean into their faith. There's just certain limits that I know I have. I can't quote the Bible. I don't know everything in it either, because I didn't go to church. I actually went to the Kingdom Hall growing up more. So that's just one thing that I know someone would better fit them, as if it's religious. I can't do that.
I'm gonna go back a little bit from what Noe has said, like about the kind of like the BSing.
Yeah.
But not really bullshitting. It's just more so like when you're talking to someone.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is. A lot of is it on like person to person, or is it like over the phone for you? Or when you're talking,
like how do I see my clients? Yeah. So COVID made things a little tricky, but I was still at the hospital and when COVID first started, so nothing really changed for me. When I was at the hospital, I was in person. There was no break when it was COVID. But private practice, typically I see people in person.
Okay.
But I will do telehealth if needed, because some people have crazy schedules, or it's just not feasible for them to be off work and make it all the way into where I work. So I see people both. Typically, I would say only one person I ever did a phone call with, and that was just an older client that couldn't really figure out the technical aspect. So typically it's either in person or telehealth over like a Zoom.
Gotcha. So when you're seeing these clients or patients, I don't know, what do you call them? Clients or patients? Is it clients? Okay.
Yeah, for private practice, I call them clients.
Okay.
In the hospital, most people call them patients, but I usually called them clients too. I didn't want to make them feel like a patient.
Gotcha.
They were struggling with enough. They didn't need that title.
Right. So when you're seeing these clients in person, are you also like looking at like their mannerisms, like how they're acting?
Yeah.
So not only are you listening to them, but then you're also like, he keeps touching their hair, he keeps doing whatever, and like, what does that mean to you? Like, what
body language?
Body language.
I think body language is definitely huge, whether I'm working with couples, families, or individuals. That's why I usually prefer in person, but I could still do Zoom. It's just, a little harder to see their behavior or whatever they're doing. But I wouldn't say it's like the main thing, but I can definitely tell, like if you're fidgeting and everything, obviously you're nervous. If you won't look at me, if you struggle with making eye contact, I think usually something's going on. But I think I do use body language maybe like 10% out of 100% of the time.
Okay.
I'm always watching.
Right.
But it doesn't always necessarily mean something. It could just be like they're nervous,
Yeah.
But I do think body language is cool.
Right. Outside of practice, do you do that?
Watch people's body language? I think my family would say 100%. I don't know. They always say that I don't turn it off, and I'm just a therapist 100% of the time. I really try to turn it off because I don't want to be analyzing people everywhere I go. But sometimes I catch myself doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you catch and you're like, why am I working right now? Like, what is something?
I do think that I'm always trying to help people in a way. And sometimes when my family or friends are confiding in me, like I am kind of going in a therapist mode, like this is the route I would take them and everything. But I try to be, just be present, be the ear. You don't need to do all the therapist stuff behind. Just be there for them. I think that's sometimes very hard for me, is not to especially pick out like patterns. I think that's very hard because I know when I'm talking to my family members, they'll be saying things and in the back of my head I'll be like, well, this is the reason why this is going on, but I'm not going to say that. Okay. Yeah, they're going to find their own way to it. But it's definitely hard to take my therapist hat off once I walk out the door.
It sounds like it. Now, whenever you're dealing with a client, and I mean, the hope is for them to stop coming and to get better,
for
right?
Sure, yeah.
whenever you see that they don't want to stop coming, like this is like their comfort zone, or now they're just using you as a friend, it's not really therapy anymore, it's kind of like they're just confining you. How do you feel about that, or how do you stop that, or what happens then? Like whenever you feel like, okay, my work here is done, but yet this person keeps coming back. Does that happen or no?
Oh, for sure. I think we always, I mean, a lot of therapists probably say it, but I think there's always some clients where you're like, are they really getting anything out of therapy? Or are they just coming to come? Whether it's because they have an attachment to me, or if, some people just want to go to vent. You know what I mean? I think sometimes that's hard for me, just to sit there and listen and not work through something like trauma, because that's what I'm used to. So sometimes it's like we're sitting there for maybe 20 minutes and they've already run out of things to talk about. And I'm like, you're not wasting my time. I want to make sure you're getting your money's worth. I want to make sure I'm doing the best I can to help you. And if you're not using the whole time, am I helping you?
So you verbalize this to them?
Oh, for sure. Okay. Yeah. No matter what.
Because they'll come and vent to you about like a bad work day or something. Like you're like, all right, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and I have no problem with people venting out and everything, but I want to know, like, what are your goals? What are we working towards? Because I really do want them to get something out of therapy. But I think conversation is always needed. So if they're coming just to vent, that's fine. But I would like, to know that and prepare for that. So I'm not trying to do 100 different directions with you.
Yeah. Now you did mention like attachment. Have you had like a guy or a girl have an attachment to you to the point where it's like stalker or like weird?
I actually had someone in the hospital that, and I was kind of uncomfortable in some of the therapy sessions that I had with this adult client. Just like kind of throwing some borderline hitting on me. But then once they were discharged, like they kept calling me.
They're like, yo, what's up?
Yeah, and leaving voicemails and everything. And
oh, damn.
Yeah. Which is actually kind of weird, because if you think of private practice versus a hospital, in the hospital, it's usually quick turnaround, right? People are only in there for like a week or so. So for someone to build that attachment, I find that's interesting, when you would think it would happen in more private practice, when you're getting to a deeper level and you're there for
constantly meeting or whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, I do have people that have attachment to me. And I think to have an attachment to your therapist can be okay if there's good boundaries, right?
It sounds natural, to be honest.
I think so, yeah, because you want them to like you and you want them to have a therapeutic relationship with you. And I think when you're working through hard stuff and stuff that really matters to you, and you're trying to make all this progress and everything, I think it's normal to attach to the person that's helping you out with that.
100%. I agree with you.
Yeah, but there has to be limits to it, right? I don't want 100%. You calling and emailing me all hours of the day trying to like tell me every second of your day. There has to be limits. But I have no problem with people having healthy attachments.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask something, and I do want to get into some stories, because you were kind of starting to tell us some stories that you had in the hospital. But I do have a question about like influencers, and you see it more and more. Obviously, it's like a common thing. But you do hear like influencers are the ones who have a lot of mental issues, or health or disorders, whatever you want to call them. It's like almost like you need to have that in order to be comfortable in front of a camera. It seems like, because like it's almost like every influencer I look at, or YouTuber or whatever you want to call them, then later on, it's like, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have, I'm bipolar, I'm this. I'm like, holy shit. And it seems like normal people, quote unquote, I guess you want to call them, like, are not that comfortable in front of a camera 24/7. Have you ever thought about that? Like,
I've thought about like celebrities and how a lot of the really successful ones have like mental health struggles, whether you're thinking like Justin Bieber, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, whoever, like a lot of them struggle with a lot of mental health issues.
Robin
and I think
Williams.
Yeah, Yeah, there's a lot of people who have committed suicide. I think that there's a lot of pressure put on them to maintain certain things that can definitely enhance mental illness or mental health, and diagnoses and everything. I think I don't know much about, specifically influencers and their mental health, but I do think if you're going to be in a camera and everything, I don't know, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't know if there's like
what the correlation would be or link.
Yeah, I do think that it could definitely cause some heightened mental illness because it's a lot of pressure. A lot of people watching you will get to you, no matter who you are.
Yeah, because you get all the bad comments, the good comments. So if you let that get to you, that would definitely put.
But also, a lot of people with like depression or anxiety or everything, they can turn it into a positive, which is, I think, why a lot of musicians struggle with mental health, is because that's what makes their music beautiful, right? They're pouring their heart into their work. So I think them musicians in general struggling with mental illness makes sense to me.
Now, I don't know if you're like into politics at all, if
Not
you're
really.
on the right or left. Did you ever look at like Trump and try to diagnose him at some of his
I mean, I didn't follow him too closely, to be honest. Overall, I try to stay out of the news and all that stuff because I find it very toxic and it affects me to a very deep level. But I know a lot of people said he's like textbook narcissist, and I mean, I have seen those qualities in him, but yeah, I don't know him enough
but
to diagnose him.
You haven't like, okay, just from like watching him, you haven't done that, like when you're watching on TV and you're like, this is kind of.
I mean, I see those narcissistic tendencies, but I don't know if I
could just be an act or something. You never know.
Right. I'd have to get to know him to diagnose him.
Gotcha.
For anyone, right? I don't like diagnosing right away. I gotta know them for a while before I'll make a diagnosis.
Okay. Have you diagnosed us already so far? like, yeah, I ain't gonna tell you on camera. I'll tell you afterwards.
Auto-analyzing everything.
I'm trying not to.
She's probably gonna tell you alcoholics for sure.
It's just one beer. One beer, guys. One beer. I'll probably have another one later. It's my birthday tomorrow, man. Come on. Man.
Really?
Yeah.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you. By the time this comes out, it's already been a few days or whatever. But
yeah. You'll still be hungover.
Nah, maybe, maybe. I don't know. So I do want to get into some of these stories because it is interesting to me, like some of the stuff you went to, especially I guess the more exciting stories. I guess are in the hospital.
Some of the
wild stuff is in the hospital, right? Compared to
in general, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen some wild stuff. I don't know what kind of stuff you hear. I mean, the
booty juice was crazy. That's crazy. I'll let you explain, but that's kind of wild.
I actually started working in the hospital when I was an intern in grad school. That's when I started there, and then I got hired on. But yeah, so now I'm sure you'll see it all over the internet too. There's tons of stories about booty juice and people in the hospital. So when people are referring to booty juice, they're referring to like an injection of medicine that is supposed to calm them down. So a lot of the times, if like there's a lot of fighting between clients in the hospital, like each person that was engaging in it usually would get this quote unquote booty juice to calm them down, because they can really tear up the place if they want to, and you want it to be a completely healthy environment for everybody. So sometimes, they needed to do that in order to make sure it was safe. But yeah, you'll see, if you even Google it or Instagram, I'm sure you'll find 1,000 people's stories about their experience with booty juice.
That's wild. You did say you were telling the story where like you had a chair thrown at you.
Yeah.
What happened? Like,
honestly, It was usually the kids unit.
The younger kids?
Yeah. So, usually under like, I would say 12.
Really?
That like to throw things. Yeah. Especially at me. Yeah. I don't think I had many like adults that ever really threw something at me. They might like throw things and it accidentally come my way, but I don't think anyone intentionally would do that. Except for the younger kids. They
didn't give a shit.
Yeah, they would try to go for everybody. I remember like a lot of the conflict was with the little kids. Like I was getting cussed out by like 7-8-year-olds or trying to rip into my heart. They really said some hurtful things. But yeah, I would say it was pretty chaotic on the child unit, but some of the teenagers got rowdy too.
So when you're saying you work at a hospital, it was a psych ward, right? Or that type of...
So it's a complete hospital that's just for mental health.
Just for mental health.
Yeah.
And they're separated, the kids from adults?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a bunch of different units. Adults would be 18 and up. Adolescents was typically like 12 up, 17, and then 12 and under was a child unit, which we got as young as like 3.
Really?
Wild.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild.
Wow.
Yeah,
3-year-olds, are they talking already or no? They're barely
talking. So what?
Yeah, what was your
but
job
I mean,
there?
sometimes we had clients that didn't talk, that were nonverbal. I remember I had this kid that was didn't want to verbalize anything, but he would write things down. But it's tough.
So a 3-year-old gets dropped off by the parents, and then the parents go home, and the kid stays there at 3.
It can. So when I worked at the hospital, I'm not sure if they do it at every hospital. I would assume so, but you can do a walk-in. But a lot of them come from the emergency room in the hospital that they transported over. I find it wild that 3-year-olds were in the hospital, even 4 and 5-year-olds. But
that seems a little off, right?
The only thing you could think of is like, well, like a tantrum, but that's kind of almost normal, right, for kids, especially if they're going to a hospital. I don't know. I'm just thinking, guessing.
I mean, to be admitted in the hospital, you have to be a danger to yourself or others. So sometimes kids do fit that criteria.
They jumping off the coffee table?
Yeah, so technically, yes, they should be in the hospital if they're going to seriously hurt themselves or others. Do they need to be? I don't know. That's a separate thing.
Did you ever treat a 3-year-old?
Yeah.
And what was that interaction like for you?
I think with kids under a certain age, it's really hard to have therapy with them because they don't talk. They're not going to, be able to sit still and focus on a conversation for that long. So with the 3-year-olds, a lot of watching them play and trying to talk to them while they're playing.
So regular baby talk, like, oh, what is that? A dinosaur? Okay, whatever, stuff like that.
Usually like how you're feeling, how you're doing, how your family is, like what's it like at home, that type of stuff. But it could be art too.
Wow. That's interesting. I never thought about going that young.
But that's why I have an age limit on who I work with in private practice. I don't go under like 11 because I find it really difficult for me to do therapy with anyone under that. But there are therapists that specialize in working with kids and doing play therapy and everything like that. That's just not what I'm good at. And I'm aware of that. That's fine. I'm not a good person to work with children. Because I do like a lot of conversation. I don't mind playing games, but I get a little confused on like what would be their goal and how do we get there with someone that's that young and not really aware of like how therapy really works and stuff like that. I would say, probably 9 and up I could work with, but I limit it at 12. I usually do really well from like 12 to probably 50s is usually who I work with.
Did you see an influx after COVID?
I would say so, honestly. Yeah. Especially with teenagers. I think a lot of people really, especially teenagers, struggled with being at home for that long and trying to do school online and everything. I think, you know, as a whole, I think the whole world shook and everyone was struggling a bit. But I definitely saw an influx during COVID. I think anytime when people are isolated, it's usually not healthy.
I agree.
Yeah, if you think of them isolating themselves, if you think solitary confinement or whatever, I don't think it's healthy for someone to
They can start going
by
crazy.
themselves in one place. Yeah. I think COVID affected a lot of people. I think it still is, to be honest.
Now, you did say that you've dealt with kids or just clients that have said some hurtful shit. How do you deal with that? Like a tough day at work. I'm talking about the worst day at work. What helps you cope through that?
Yeah. In the hospital, it was easier, I think, because you know they're struggling with like very heightened acuity and everything. There's a lot going on for them. Even, you know, being admitted to the hospital is stressful. So I think I was able to let go of that a little easier. In private practice, I think there hasn't been as much that's like super hurtful or anything. I did have someone almost kind of think about getting a lawyer, because I reported child abuse. But I think that was the only thing that really bothered me for days.
Because like the fact that you knew that there was child abuse, you reported it, or the lawyer part of it?
Well, it bothered me, the lawyer part. It bothered me that they thought I was twisting the child's words to be abuse.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you were treating the child. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was a little confused there.
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so you were.
I was thinking the same way.
Yeah, I was treating the child, and the child was reporting that there was physical abuse in the home. So I'm a mandated reporter. I had to report it to DCFS, and you know DCFS has, I think, 24 hours to start investigating, and I was contacted by the mom real quickly saying that I made the kid say stuff and twist the words, and then she was like, it was all in email too, and she was saying, I'm thinking about getting a lawyer. So I was talking to my boss about it, and she's like, stop communication right there.
Lawyer up on this side too.
Right. She's like, I'm contacting our lawyer.
In that case, man, that's a tough situation to be in.
That's always my fear, to be honest, is getting sued for trying to do the right thing, or there is something going on in the home, right? But it's covered up. That's terrifying.
And you can't say anything?
Right. That's terrifying. Because, you know, DCFS is only going to see what they're saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like they can go check and then nothing's here. All right, bye.
Exactly.
Which is more than likely what could have happened in that case too.
For sure. I think that happens all too often, to be honest.
Crazy.
We saw a lot of that in the hospital too, but at the same time, we can only take their word for it, right? We don't really know what's going on in the home, but I'm always going to take my client's word. If they're saying something's wrong, I'm going to.
And my guess is you never saw this person again.
No.
So
never heard from them again.
That's terrible. So now you know, like, all right, this person's not getting help. They're probably still getting abused, and that's what really weighs on you.
That really bothered me. That really, really bothered me. I struggled a lot cutting the conversation with mom right there. I struggled a lot because if what the kid was saying was true, they needed someone to talk to, for sure. They needed someone to come and save them, and I can only do so much.
That sucks, man. Because you hear that, like, what was that Netflix documentary with the kid from Cali?
Yeah, Fernandez or something?
Yeah.
Oh, Gabriel?
Gabriel.
That honestly has been bugging me the last few days.
Really?
I remember watching that documentary, I think it was like 2 years ago or something. But yeah, that sticks
where it's
with
like
me
your
a
hands
lot.
are tied, right? You can't do
For
anything,
sure.
and like you said, DCFS is going to check, and
all you can do is report it, right?
Oh.
Can't steal the kid and protect them. I think that's super terrifying. Super, super terrifying. Is to know what's going on and you're trying to do something about it and you can't.
You're like handcuffed, you know, like you can't do anything yourself.
Yeah.
That wasn't even my last question though. Like, as far as like, how do you deal with it? How do you help your own mental health? Because I know I talk to people. I try to talk to friends and even though I'm dealing with my own stuff, but you try to help out whoever you can, try to listen to them and whatnot. But sometimes just even myself, I'm overwhelmed, like sounds bad, but listening to them and they're whatever they're going through.
Right.
And you do that for a living.
Right.
I can only imagine, like, at least if I was in your shoes, I'd be extremely overwhelmed.
Yeah. I think it definitely, depends on the day, depends on the week, what my clients are going through, what I'm going through, what my family's going through. A lot of my focus is when I get home, I take my work clothes off, I change into comfy clothes, and that gives me a disconnect. I automatically feel like I'm at home hanging out, chilling. So I always suggest that to anyone who has trouble unplugging from their job. I think self-care is huge to be able to manage everything. I spend a lot of time with my family, hanging out with my family because they're my people. They're my favorite people.
Of course.
And I think that helps a lot. They keep me grounded and everything. And, they're the reason I live. So I think staying close with everybody, that's what really keeps me going.
My another last question I have, is there anything that you're kind of numb to because you've done this for so long?
Yeah, I think that's something I always got to check myself, is to make sure I'm not getting desensitized. For, like, if I have a client that's constantly reaching out in crisis mode, and I know the client so well that I know they're not going to hurt themselves or anything else, like this is what they're struggling at the moment and they just need some support. Sometimes it does get tiring, like them saying things to get a reaction out of me. I have had clients in the past that do say they're going to do something in order to get a reaction, and once I give them that reaction, they're fine. I think I struggle the most with trying not to check out, to be honest, trying not to check out. And I think, again, it's a boundary thing, which is tough because if someone's freaking out and they want you to help, you want to help. But at the same time, if it's just someone looking for a reaction from you, you need to set some limits, set some boundaries. But it is tough. It is tough to not have compassion fatigue. But I think, me personally, I'm always trying to reevaluate myself and make sure that I am doing the best I can. I'm putting my 100% effort into it, and they're getting everything they can get from me. That's just my reminder. They're there for help. You have to help them.
Yeah. You got a tough job.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that much right now.
Yeah,
but I'm telling you, I think if everyone processed through their trauma, I think mental illness would be a lot less than what it is. But a lot of people have, whether, it's childhood trauma or relationship trauma, a lot of us don't even recognize that it's trauma or something that needs to be worked through. So it just sits there and bottles up. And then you're presenting with anxiety or whatever it is, but really it's because whatever happened 20 years ago, right? So I think a lot of therapists would probably be out of business if we all process through our trauma.
So I have two more. How are we doing on time?
We're about to start wrapping up.
Yeah, I got two more things, bro. Go ahead. So you just said the trauma thing, right? Mm-hmm. If you had to give our people or the people 2 or 3 tips on how to figure out if you are dealing with or you have trauma and you have to deal with it, like what would be your tips? Like what should people do to figure out, okay, I think this is caused by trauma, or what should I do next, or how do I work through this?
I think sometimes it's really hard for us to evaluate ourselves. So I think it's important some people recognize that they have trauma by talking to their partner, right? They're like, oh, my partner has this childhood or whatever. And their partner tells them like, hey, what you experience is not normal. That's trauma. Sometimes people realize it through whoever they have around them, but some people do go to a therapist that tells them. I've had a lot of clients that come in for presenting issues, whether it's depression, anxiety, or other stuff, where I'm like, hey, let's dig back. And it is trauma that they weren't even aware of, that's considered trauma. I think a lot of times, whether even culturally, right? Some cultures are You keep everything in the family. Like yelling can be normal. Hitting can be normal. All of that stuff. But it builds trauma. And it sits there for years and years until you process through it. So, I mean, people are going to continue to struggle unless they're able to, rewind and try to process through all of that. I think that's the biggest thing.
And then the second thing for me, and then I'll let Checo wrap it up. Divorce being like at an all-time high.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest things that you see, with your clients that you can say, hey, couples, if you guys can work on this, it can save your marriage?
I actually do work with a lot of couples too. And the number one thing I've seen, whether actually my own experiences versus professional ones, my clients, communication, honestly, is the number one thing. Communication and respect. I think a lot of times the communication is what struggles, and what leads to a lot of the issues in marriages is because they don't know how to talk to each other. They always feel like the other person's attacking them, so they're automatically in defense mode, and you can't. It just blows up, right? I think I've told every single couple that I've worked with that you need to work on the communication. You need to focus on the feelings instead of like, you did this to me. Just say, when you did this, it made me feel this way. You know what I mean? Trying to focus on more of the message you're getting instead of the actual, thing, because the other person will feel like you're attacking them. It's just how you word things, right? So even for individuals, communication is key to everything.
I agree.
Love it.
I agree. 100%. Thank you, Reese, for coming on and
educating us.
Educating us 100%. Educating us 100%.
I mean, I know I didn't say things 100% how I probably wanted, but I appreciate you guys having me.
Oh, it was awesome, man.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Anytime I could talk about mental health, it's a great experience.
Yeah, hopefully we can have you back on if you're down to drive another 2 hours out here. Again, I apologize. I didn't know it was that far for you. But
very worth it. Very worth it.
If people do want to reach out to you, how can they? How would they be able to reach out to you? Maybe social media, or I don't know how. Do you want them to go straight to your work, or?
I think it depends on what they're reaching out with, right? If they're reaching out in crisis mode, you probably should go through the work. If people just want to be my friend, Instagram's cool. It's cool. Yeah. Email, whatever.
Hey, don't try to use her as a friend and then as a therapist too.
Right.
She gotta get paid.
You gotta pay, bro. You gotta pay, bro.
Hey, dude, you got me tripping out with this camera. I'm supposed to be looking at that one. I'm like looking at this one like an idiot.
How can they reach you then? If they want to be your friend, what would be your Instagram so they can reach you to?
What is my Instagram? I think it's Reese Ewood. But yeah, that's my Instagram. I don't know if I want to.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I would. Work stuff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, whatever you want.
They'll find me if they want to find me.
All right. All right. Or any? Is there like a hotline that you kind of know off the top of your head where you're like, hey, if you're going through something, this is probably what you should.
There's
websites or
suicide hotline.
Suicide hotline.
I can't remember what it was off the top of my head.
That's probably a good thing. You should not know that off the top of your head.
I've known people that worked for it, and yeah, I think that's a difficult thing to do. But 911, right? They'll point you to all the right directions.
Yeah. What is the other one? What is the operator? 888 or what is it?
I have no idea.
Man, that sucks that we forgot all that.
Plus
711, isn't it?
I have no idea.
Whatever it is.
If people are in crisis, though, go to the emergency room. They're there for mental health too. It's not just physical health.
I can't believe we forgot about the damn operator, dude. Where you would call and say, "Hey, connect me to the Domino's at whatever," and then they connect you to it.
Is that still a thing?
That was old school landlines, wasn't it? I remember doing that.
That probably still exists, though.
Maybe. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it does.
But
I think Google took their job, bro.
Oh, hey, dude. 411 is now you guys got me tripping, dude. What is it?
I have no idea, bro.
That's wild. All right, whatever. It's cool.
All right. Well, 911.
Yeah.
Suicide hotline. if you can think of any websites, let me know later on, and I'll link them or anything like that. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Ya saben. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. Estamos para la otra. Peace.